Hello and welcome to History Lesson 3. Before we begin, can you please get something to write with and write on? Pause the screen. Okay, let's begin. So, what did ancient Romans believe in? Your success criteria for today is I can understand how we know about Romans' beliefs. I understand the significance of beliefs in Roman society. I can understand and describe the beliefs and practices of ancient Romans. And the challenge for today, I can clearly identify which examples, the beliefs and practice of ancient Rome's. I'll read that again. I can clearly identify with examples the beliefs and practices of ancient Romans. So here's some vocabulary that you know. My turn, your turn. Myth. Myth. Offering. Offering. Belief. Belief. And words that you will meet today are polytheism, polytheism, worship, worship, sacrifice, sacrifice, and temple, temple. Well done. So which other ancient civilizations used mythology to explain about the world? Which other ancient civilization used mythology to explain about the world? So you need to think back to your prior learning, maybe not in year 4, maybe year 3 or year 2. You may have come up with the Egyptians. Well done. So what was the myth of Romulus and Remus? Does anyone know? Okay, so Remus and Romulus, or Romulus and Remus, as babies, the boys were left to drown in the river Tiber by their evil uncle, but they were rescued by a wolf, and the wolf helped the children grow up until they were a bit older. When the boys were older, they took revenge on their uncle and killed him. Afterwards, the twins returned to start a new city, but they squabbled about where to build it. Romulus wanted to build it on the Palatine Hill, and Remus preferred the Aventine Hill. To find out who was right, they looked for a sign from the gods. However, they couldn't agree on that either, and both thought that the gods were favoring them. One day, the twins got in a fight after Remus made fun of Romulus. Remus was killed, and Romulus named the new city Roma after himself, of course. Do you think the story of Remus and Romulus is true? What prevents us from being certain? Pause the screen and see if you can answer these questions. Okay. Now, because it's a myth, we know this story isn't true, and we can't be certain because there's no documents in history to tell us about Remus and Romulus apart from the mythical stories. As we've said, the story of Remus and Romulus is an example of a myth. It describes the adventures of beings, often who have supernatural powers. A myth is a story that attempts to explain mysterious events. So why did the Romans believe in myths like this one? And what is this myth helping us to understand? Pause the screen and see if you can answer these questions. Okay, here's another myth, and this myth is of Jupiter and the bee. One fine day, after being irritated by humans taking away her honey, the queen of the hive decided to visit Jupiter. After reaching Olympus, she offered fresh honey to Jupiter. Delighted by the taste of the honey, Jupiter promised to fulfill one of her wishes. She asked, "Give me, I pray thee, a sting, which if any mortal approaches to take my honey, I may kill him." Displeased by her request because of his love for the human race, he did not grant her wish, but at the risk of her own life. He said, "For if you use your sting, it shall remain in the wound you make, and then you will die from the loss of it." What is this myth trying to tell us? Pause the screen and see if you can discuss this. So I think the myth might be trying to tell us how the bee came to the point where every time the bee stings somebody, the sting becomes lost. So I don't know if you know, but whenever you get a bee sting or a bee has stung someone, the sting is removed from the bee. So how do we know about these myths? Mosaics and fresco wall paintings of Roman mythology have been found at sites like Pompeii. Okay, archaeologists have found mosaics and pottery to show these mythologies. Romans wrote down their myths in Latin, which have survived and been translated and copied ever since. So if you look at the image to the here, that's a myth and it has been written in Latin. And here is a mosaic that has again depicted a myth. Statues and artifacts depicting gods survived. So here's some statues that show some Greek gods. What can we learn from the interpretation of the Roman gods? We can learn about polytheism, which is the belief in many gods. I know that Hindus believe in many gods. That's called polytheism. The ancient Roman civilization existed before the birth of Jesus Christ. Even after the birth of Christianity, they didn't adopt the region until the 4th century AD. Rather than one god, they believed in many. Different gods were in charge of different things. So Apollo was the god of sun. Cupid was the god of love. Diana, the goddess of hunting. There are many gods. We can go down the list. We have Fortuna, the goddess of fortune. Juno, the goddess of marriage. Jupiter, the king of the gods and the god of thunder. Mars, the god of war. Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. Neptune, the god of the sea. Pluto, the god of the underworld. Saturn, god of harvest and agriculture. Venus, goddess of love and beauty. And Vulcan, the god of fire, the forge, and the blacksmiths. So what I'd like you to do in your books on your piece of paper is choose 3 of those gods, okay? So you're going to choose 3 of those gods, and for each explain why the Romans might have prayed or offered a sacrifice to this particular god. So an example of what you might do is write down the god Saturn, and then you might write, Romans may pray to Saturn to ensure that they have a fruitful harvest so they can sell their crops, because we know that the god of harvest and agriculture is Saturn. You may write down Minerva, who is the goddess of wisdom. So you may write, Romans may pray to Minerva to make sure that they make the right choices in their lives because she's the god of wisdom. So you can pause the screen now and have a go at that for me. Okay, let's move on. So the Temple of Saturn. Here is a modern reconstruction of the Temple of Saturn alongside the remaining physical archaeological remains in Rome today. So if you were to go to Rome, you would see on your right this, which is the remaining physical archaeological remains in Rome today of the Temple of Saturn. So what do these grand temples suggest about the importance of the gods to ancient Romans? How can these temples tell us that the gods were believed to be important? Pause the screen and discuss your answer. And the Roman temple. Roman temples were built for specific gods. People would visit the temple to worship their god or goddesses and offer them gifts or sacrifice. What is a sacrifice? What kind of gifts do you think they could offer? Pause the screen and see if you can answer these 2 questions. Oops. So we know that a sacrifice is an offering, don't we? And maybe they could give fruit or jewelry or incense, that sort of thing. So now you're going to begin your independent task. Remember, we're looking at what did the Romans believe in, okay? So you're going to answer these questions using the best of your knowledge. If you need to, you can go back through this video to help you answer the questions. So the first question is, what does polytheism mean? Polytheism is the belief in gods. Okay, you have a word bank at the bottom of the screen. The words are stories, many, mystery, unexplained, and temples. Okay, so you need to use those words to fill in the gaps. Write them in full sentences in your books. The next question is, what did the Romans do to show their respect to gods? Romans built where they made to the gods. What is a myth? What was the purpose of a myth? A myth is a which explains because in the ancient Roman period, they did not have the scientific understanding of events like we do now. Now, you don't have to use the sentences here. You can write your own sentences if you would like to. Your challenge at the bottom of the screen is to answer the following question. How were ancient Roman beliefs similar to other ancient civilizations like Egypt and Greece? Okay, pause the screen and do this activity for me. Okay, once you finish this activity, what you're going to do for me is go to Purple Mash and complete the 2 quiz on history lesson 3 for me. Well done, and I'll see you next week for another history lesson. Bye.